Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good day. So today what we want to do is to continue with our problem formulation class, where this is the second part. If you remember, the first part dealt with the formulation of the problem, looking at the sources of information for the problem and identification of the problem. And also we look at how to do proper literature review, where from the literature review, now we have identified the problem. Say if we have come to the point at which we are able to identify the problem, then in this second part of problem formulation, we go to the actual writing of the problem formulation, problem statement, research questions, and so on. So this is what we're going to deal with in this particular lecture today. So before going further, again, just revise in terms of the chapters required for the proposal. So the first chapter that's required will be the introduction, which is a chapter that define the problem. Yeah, this chapter should define the problem, and it consists of the following sections: the background, a little bit about the problem in general. This particularly should, if you remember the pyramid, the inverted pyramid, it'll be the top of the pyramid. Maybe you talk about global warming, maybe you talk about flooding, maybe you talk about hunger, maybe about water security, food security, all this background, very general. And then you start to go in, yeah, along the pyramid to do the literature review, explaining the previous research and the knowledge gap, and then you go to problem statement, purpose statement, research questions, objective, scope, and significance. So that's what we are going to deal with in this particular lecture, which is from problem statement. I mean, we have done the literature review. Now we're going to go to how to write the problem statement, purpose statement, research question, objective, scope, and significance. And if you remember again, normally the proposal consists of 4 parts. Chapter 1, introduction, which we are going to deal with today. And then, of course, the second chapter will be literature review, which this literature review will be slightly different, or basically strengthen the chapter 1 literature review. Literature review in chapter 1 basically just to define the problem, just to identify the knowledge gap. But literature in chapter 2 will be, you are going to look at very detailed about what other people have done on your topic, on this particular problem that you've chosen. So maybe you want to look at the theoretical framework, all the theories, equations, and so on that they use, the methods that they use, and also the relevant results that might be helpful in developing your own methodology. And in chapter 3, you go into the research methodology itself. I mean, the methodology of carrying out your research, where you need to show how to achieve the objectives of the research, including the flowchart and the explanation of each phase of the activities, and what you want to do and how are you going to do it. So that's a explanation in the whole part of chapter 3. And in chapter 4, normally during proposal stage, we present our preliminary results. Whatever, just to give a brief report, maybe 1 or 2 pages, a few pages, or 1 or 2 slides on what you have done so far and obtained from finishing the methodology, and I mean the write-up from the introduction, literature review, methodology. Definitely you have done some work. Maybe you have identified some models and so on. So those primary data that you get, so you share in chapter 4. It's not compulsory, but it's better to show that you have got something already going. Okay, so some part of methodology you have already moved. Okay, so again, what we want to do in this class is not looking at chapter 2, 3, or 4, but we're looking at chapter 1. So we are going to look at chapter 1. And chapter 1, as we said, is problem formulation and definition. So you are going to write from your review of the literature, what is your problem statement, the purpose statement, hypothesis if there's any, research questions, objective, scope, and significance. These are the main important elements of chapter 1. Of course, there'll be normally people also add on towards the end there about the in a thesis. Normally people will write the structure of the thesis, telling about how many chapters they have and so on. But in this case, it's not necessary for that. You can end with significance. Okay, so this is just to show the scope of the work that we are looking at in this particular problem formulation. This is what is in chapter 1. Okay, so from the background, go to problem statement, purpose statement, research questions, objectives. Methodology, of course, will be covered in chapter 3, okay, which we are going to do later. And then this is conclusions is only after you have finished after you finish your work, then you are going to write the conclusions, okay, after you finish your research. What we want to show here is the flow from problem statement to conclusions. Okay, there's a flow there. There are connections between them. You can mapping or alignment from problem statement. It goes into purpose statement. From purpose statement, it goes into research questions, and from research questions goes to objectives. Okay, and you show the methodology will be actually showing how you achieve the objective. And finally, when you finish your work, which finish your research, you're going to conclude. So that's the flow. But what we want to show here is that problem statement is related, purpose statement is related to problem statement, research question is related to purpose statement and problem statement, objectives is related to research questions, methodology is related to objectives, and finally, when you conclude your research, you're going to conclude in relation to whatever objectives and research question you have. Okay, so you're going to relate that to uh, whatever objective and research question. And finally, if you answer these objectives and research question, you are going to solve the problem, meaning there'll be no more gap in knowledge. Researchers who come after you will not be able to claim that there is a gap in knowledge because you have found this conclusion that you have for the findings of your research have already answered the objectives and research questions, and as such, there's no more problem. So this is how the scheme of things in research. Yeah? So we start with a gap in knowledge and we end with filling in the gap in the conclusions. Along the way, you define the purpose, you define research question, you define the objectives, and you define how you want to achieve the objectives, carry out the work, and finally you'll get the conclusion. Okay, so now we go to the first part, which is writing the problem statement. You have already identified, for example, from your literature review, mind you that again, literature review is a very, very, very important aspect of problem statement. You cannot make problem statement without doing literature review. Okay, because you need to identify the gap knowledge, and problem statement is the gap knowledge. So you must identify the research gap. So you explain a little bit what's happening, what is the current the state of the art of the current research in this specific area that you're looking at, and after that you identify the research gap. Yeah, by having such words such. However, there is no study on. This is a typical way of people trying to declare the research gap. Okay, identify and declare it. Okay, so problem statement clearly states the actual gap in knowledge. So it is, I would say, a brave declaration, brave and unequivocal, unequivocal statement, which declare with confidence that I know nobody has done this. Okay, you cannot say probably there is nothing. No, 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 no. You must make sure that there is no one has done it. You cannot say probably there is no one has done. There is no research in this particular area. So you must. That's why you must survey all the literature that's available in that particular area that you're looking at. Okay, that's number one. Number two, it is not only based on idea or feelings, but it must be based on solid backing of a survey of the current literature. So you cannot just say that it is believed that there is nothing done in this area, or it is believed that this thing will work. You cannot say it just like that. You cannot say that yeah, according to industry practitioners, this is an idea that is worth exploring. No, that's not, an industry practitioner or maybe some group of teachers or maybe certain NGO or certain government agency says that this is a good idea to study or this is the problem. No, that is the problem that they feel on the ground. But what we are looking at is problem in literature, the gap in knowledge in the literature. Maybe they have not read it, but now you have read the literature, you have surveyed all the literature, and you say, yes, according to the literature, there is nothing being studied or has been studied in this particular area. So your research is to fill in this gap. That means to solve the research problem, culminating with your research contribution. That's why research at master's and PhD level, you must have research contribution. And what research contribution means is the knowledge that is you are contributing to the knowledge, to the body of knowledge of human knowledge about this particular area. So this statement is a confident, as I said just now, unequivocal declaration of the knowledge gap or unknown, not covered by current research. So that's why you must say there is little research in this field that examines sex. Or you must say existing research examines sex but does not account for why. So you must say that. So we will see some example from some students, previous students. For example, this student says that the above literature review survey indicates so far there is no report of fabricating and uh, and several realms remain unexplored. So he is very particular, saying that yes, I've read the literature, I've presented the literature above, yeah, and from the literature, these are the areas that have not been explored. Okay, so that's one example. Another example we see here. Well, we don't understand the actual field or the actual uh, topic of the study, but we can see how it's written. Yeah, so he put previous work have shown that as a versatile and so on. So from the literature review that he gave here, he says, nevertheless, there has been a lack of research on the implementation of SLIDS to improve PhD's performance. So we see how he surveyed the literature and say what is the gap, where is the gap in knowledge. Okay, and see another example. Most studies retrofitting buildings use passive active techniques, etc., etc., etc. There is insufficient research. So by putting the statement most studies in the previous paragraphs or previous sections, he has already explained the literature. So it's not that suddenly you start with more studies like this without giving the literature citations. The citation has appeared before. This is only the concluding statement. Okay, we are talking about the concluding statement, the last two paragraphs of problem statement section. Okay, so a problem statement section may contains maybe one or two, two or three pages. Yeah, at the end of it, this is the conclusion. The actual problem statement is just about two paragraphs, okay, or one paragraph also will also do to declare from the previous literature review that I've done. See, I'm concluding here that there is insufficient research on optimal combination of passive and active techniques. It's another example. This is about drilling, is production technology. Yeah. So we see here um, that again he quoted, it's already number 16 there, the reference. So he has before this 15 citations. So after studying all those 16 until 20 uh, liter, research, other people research, yeah, other people's research, he conclude that the experiments conclude that angles work better and so on. However, another key question remains unanswered. So this is the gap that he has found. Oh, nobody has done about this thing. Can two geometry minimize the formation of burr in titanium 6 AI 4V produced by the selective melting? So that is a question that he's trying to solve. Yeah, because nobody has done it. Nobody uh, have answered this question. So because of that, he has selected that as his problem statement. Another example here, this is about ship or boat, where he's talking about low weight wash boats. Okay, so what happened is when there are a lot of studies about weight wash. Weight wash means the wake or the waves that comes out at the back, at the stern part of the boat as the boat pass, and it comes to the seashore or river banks and cause erosion. Okay, so what this guy is saying, almost all are mainly concerned with ferries and other high-speed marine craft. Okay, so in fact, except for Fadil, there is not much work being done in the field of smaller, slower speed craft. Okay, in fact, there is not a single study that has addressed the issue for fishing boats. So you see, if from the big one, it says people are looking at the big ones. Even the big one, and then people are looking at small ones as well. Like Fadil, only one study look at slower, small speed craft. In fact, there is not a single study that has addressed the issue for fishing boats. So he found the gap in knowledge that he filled in. Yeah. So this guy, in fact, is already graduated a few years ago. Okay. Uh, so this is another one. Maybe so far studies says that with solar energy in the infrared, although somebody has looked at the other spectrum, there is no study on near ultraviolet region with small wavelengths. Okay, this is only a hypothetical statement actually. So just to show how that to how to actually focus on your gap. Yeah. Okay, so that's finish about problem statement. So what you have to do is you have to uh, to try to write your own problem statement by looking at the previous examples and so on. You write how your problem statement uh, will be written after finishing your literature review. Okay, then your background and your basic literature review, you identify the problem, and now you write it. So that's one exercise that you can do immediately, after looking at those slides. Now we go to the next part. After completing your problem statement, you go for purpose statement. Purpose statement is just rewriting the problem statement that shape the direction of research. So now you have identified that's a problem. Now, so what do you want to do? Just that. So maybe normally there are three ways of writing that. You can use purpose, goal, or aim. So for example, the purpose of this study is to address, there's two missing there, to address this gap in the existing research by carrying out field experiments, for example. So that's an example. You see for example, some example that people use here. One guy used the main objective of the research is to produce real-time image stitching for inspection and remote sensing. Okay, so sometimes people use main objective, although I don't recommend it, because he has the main objective and then he has the objectives. Okay, the main objective is the purpose or the goal or the aim of the study. Yeah. So if I were to ask you, can you identify what is the problem statement of this guy from his purpose statement? you can easily identify it. Yeah, you can say, oh, since the main objective is to produce real-time image, he's going to fill in that gap in knowledge. That means nobody has done production of uh, uh, real-time image stitching, yeah, for inspection. Same like the second one. The purpose of the study is to develop micro drilling tool geometry to be used in SLM titanium alloy process. Oh, okay. That means nobody has done that. And similarly, the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one are all related to the problem statement. So you can see that the purpose is just restating the problem, restating the problem in a new way. Okay, just to show that, okay, since that's a problem, that's a gap in knowledge. So what I want to do is to fill in the gap in knowledge. That's all. So basically, that's why I said you change from identifying the gap and declaring it to be the gap into making it what is your intention. Now, my intention is to fill in the gap. So it's to do what? To study this, to propose that, and to develop this, and so on. Okay? So that is a purpose statement. Very simple. It's just rewriting of your problem statement. We go to hypothesis. Hypothesis, not all research work require hypothesis. Yeah, sometimes, and not all research proposal need to come up with hypothesis. So if necessary, you use it. Yeah, hypothesis just uh, is educated guess or tentative conclusion about relationship between the variables. So because if you are studying cause and effect particularly, then you normally have hypothesis. Yeah, cause and effect. You do something and you expect to something to happen. Then you have a hypothesis. That means you tentatively you think this is going to be higher or lower or improve or not improve. So that is an educated guess or tentative conclusion. So, for example, if the problem statement is current studies indicate good performance of biofuel in diesel engines. However, there is not much study over the concern that it will increase engine breakdown, okay, and maintenance costs. So that is the problem statement. Studies, there's a lot of studies about this biofuel, but nobody has studied the uh, increased engine breakdown and maintenance costs. So the purpose of his study, of course, is to study the effect of using biodiesel on this engine on engine breakdown and maintenance costs. That is the purpose. But the hypothesis will be he must have an expected uh, on expected answer or expected conclusion. Yeah, I think it's going to be if you use biofuel, then engine breakdown frequency and maintenance cost will increase. So of course, the research is trying to prove or disprove this hypothesis. So this apply when you are dealing with cause and effect. But some other works, mostly when you develop something and so on, then hypothesis is not required. That's why, uh, in my opinion, you do not have to write your hypothesis unless your work is involved cause and effect. Okay, so later in our assignment or in our exercise, you are not required to write your hypothesis. It's only, I would say, recommended to write, but it's not compulsory. So we go on to the next part. So we have problem statement. After that, purpose statement. After that, hypothesis. Now we come to research questions. Okay, so research question. Research question is a restatement of problem statement in a more specific manner. So research and you focus on the problem and identify what can be measured. So you break down the actual thing that you are looking for. What is it that you do not know, right? Because problem statement and purpose statement is still very general. You say you want to, nobody has studied this, nobody has looked at that. But what exactly you want to study? So that is the research question. The research question is you define the actual thing that you want to find out exactly. So you write research questions as numbered bullets, and this can be later translated into objectives. We'll show how. We'll show you how. So research question. For example, you can say, to what extent does changes in hull form contribute towards the total cost of ship? Okay. How will changes in the early temperature affect the brittleness of the weld? Do some group of students spend more money at the cafeteria than other group of students? What is the best method for estimating wave periods from satellite altimetry data? So all these are could be research questions, yeah, for things, for the research. And of course, we expect research questions to be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, but not too many. But I wouldn't expect more than 5 research questions, yeah, for even masters and PhD. 5 research questions would be too many already. So these are the things that you are exactly looking for in your actual research. And because of that, you can convert this directly into objectives. Now, if you remember our friend John, remember what he was doing? He studied about his grandma's bread and the effect of sugar, fine white sugar, on the size of the bread that his grandma bake, right? So, if I were to ask you, what do you think is John's problem statement? I think we have seen that one, yeah. So this is his problem statement. Problem statement: a lot of research has been done to improve the size of grandma's bread. However, so far, no research has been carried out to study the effect of different amount of sugar to improve the size of grandma's bread. In fact, not different amount of sugar only, different amount of fine white sugar, yeah, to improve the size of grandma's bread. So, what is his purpose? The purpose of the research is to study the effect of different amount of sugar to improve the size of grandma's bread. So, it's just a restatement of the problem statement, or rewriting of the problem statement. And now, can you suggest 2 research questions that John will use in his research? So you think about it first. Maybe you can write down before going next year. You can think of what would be the 2 research questions that is in John's mind and in his research. So you go on. So the 2 research questions will be: number 1, does the amount of sugar have an effect on the size of grandma's bread? Oh, my spelling again. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, what is the amount of sugar that gives the biggest loaf? So first, you want to see whether is there an effect. Number 2, he wants to identify what exactly it is. Okay, so you see, this is research questions. Later we see how these research questions can be converted into objectives. So objectives are what research is intended to accomplish. That means the new knowledge being generated. Okay, so they are generated from problem statement and research questions, which means that achieving the objective means research question and research problems are solved. Like I showed just now, there is a strong relationship or alignment between problem statement, purpose statement, research question, objectives, methodology, and finally the conclusions. So achievement of objective will be checked at the end of the project and summarized in the conclusion chapter. And your methodology is directly related to the way to achieve the objective. So again, this one, we remember I showed earlier, the problem statement. Now we have seen problem statement, purpose statement, research question. Now research question is aligned to this objective. So for example, objective 1 is how to answer research objective number 1, and objective 2 is how to achieve how to answer research question number 2. If you remember John's example just now, that if we had 2 research questions, those 2 research questions can be converted into objectives. Yeah. Right. So now we have some guideline in terms of how to write these objectives. Like research question hypothesis, objectives are specific restatement of the purpose. And objective should be to find answers to research questions. So for example, you can write objective like this to establish the relationship between catamaran, demand spacing, and its seakeeping performance, to develop new method for vehicle stability assessment, to determine the effect of changing fuel quality, uh, and the breakdown, the effect of changing fuel quality on the breakdown frequency of slow speed diesel engines. Yeah, so these are example objectives. It is very specific, something that you want to achieve. Okay, and objectives must be SMART. And what is SMART? SMART. Okay, SMART. S is for specific. Details exactly what needs to be done. Okay, what needs to be done must be specific and can be measured. It's measurable. Okay, achievement or progress can be measured. By the end of your study, whether it's 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, we can measure that you have achieved your objective. Have you achieved your objective? Yes. Okay, and you give me what is it that you have achieved. Okay, it is achievable, uh, and it is realistic, and it is within the time period. That is clearly within time. That means if you are doing masters, for example, do not make too many objectives or too big an objectives that we feel that you are not going to be able to achieve within 2 years. Yeah, so make sure that you make it specific, it is measurable, it's something that you can achieve within the time. Yeah, it is realistic as well. Okay, so in that case then we need to choose which are the smart word. We are talking about smart, yeah? Smart word, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, yeah, realistic and timely. Then the smart words are those on the right in this case. Determine, identify, derive, show, assess, develop. These are examples. Yeah. The non-smart words are big, general, open-ended words like investigate. If you put objective to investigate, you are investigating. It's not smart. It's not specific and measurable. Investigate is not specific and measurable. Because you ask you, have you investigated? Then, yeah, I have investigated. But what is that new knowledge that coming? It's not there. But if we ask you, have you determined? Yes, this is what I have determined. This is what very specific that you can pick up. Okay, the knowledge. Okay, this is what I've determined. You can show the graph determined. You can identify. Yes, I can show what I've identified. I've derived. This is the equation or the model. Okay, you want to show. So this I can show it now. I can assess. Yeah, I've assessed. This is the performance. Develop. I have developed it. But when you have to investigate, I have investigated it. How can you show that you have done investigation other than showing your whole thesis? The whole thesis is investigation. The whole research is investigation. The whole research is study. The whole research is explore. The whole research is observe. But within that, what have you determined? What have you identified? What have you derived? What have you shown? What have you assessed? What have you developed? Those are the actual objectives that is required here. So always remember, do not use this one in the objectives and use this one. Yeah, these are okay. This one not okay. Now, again, let's go a bit more detail in terms of writing objectives. I'm going to repeat some of the things that I mentioned before this. Objectives must be written in numbered bullets. This is something that sometimes people miss. Yeah, should be numbered bullet because we are going to refer to them later in your methodology, in your discussions, in your results. You're going to say this is to achieve objective 1. So you cannot write objectives as bullet without numbers. You cannot say the first objective or the top objective or the bottom objective. No, you must say objective which what specific, yeah. Objective number 1, number 2, number 3. So in terms of numbers, This is a rough guideline. Normally, for PhD level, you write 3 to 5 objectives. Not less than 3, not more than 5. Normally 3 or 4. I would recommend 3 to 4 only. But sometimes people have 5. And for master's level, 2 or 3. Enough. Do not go 5, do not go 4. And 1 is also not acceptable. So I would say normally it will be 3 and 4 here. And here will be 2 and 3. Okay, for masters. Remember this. So later when you write your assignment, you must make sure that you have 3 or 4 in your, if you are doing PhD and you're doing masters, only 2 or 3. And again, there are some guidelines writing goal objectives. Number 1 should be specific, measurable, the smart one. So ask yourself, can the achievement of the objective be measured or assessed at the end of the study? So you put investigate, explore, study. How do you measure this at the end of the study? Because they are very broad, open-ended, general. They are neither specific nor measurable. Number 2, the objective should be about finding new knowledge, method, procedures, relationships, the unknown, the knowledge gaps. So that's why we use the word such as determine, assess, develop, establish, obtain, identify. For example, these are some example, yeah? So, determine the effect, identify the most suitable method, assess the feasibility, establish a relationship, develop the new procedure, derive a model. So these are some examples that you can use. So try to use these words as much as possible and avoid using the previous words. Clearly, the above objectives are specific and measurable. The achievement or otherwise can easily be measured. And number 3, objectives should not involve tasks, activities which are part of methodology. You should not write your objectives to be to carry out experiment, or to conduct CFD analysis, or to analyze, or to construct, yeah, because these are just tasks. Carry out experiment are not objectives, but only means to find the unknown, the new knowledge. So convert this objective into the form described in 2 above here. So this should not be your objective. These are methodology. You need to carry out CFD. You need to carry out experiment and so on. Do not put this as the aim or the thing that you are going to seek, because you say objective is about knowledge that you are going to generate. So you cannot do that. In fact, if you were to write it like this, then you cannot relate to research questions. Okay, because objectives should be directly related to research question. In fact, it can be mapped one to each research question, or sometimes one research question can be 2 objectives also okay. Yeah, but the thing is you must have the objective. If objectives are met to properly written research question, the objective will most probably automatically fulfill rule 1 to 3 above. Okay. As a check, when you have written the objective, work backward to check its ability by trying to write the research question which is being answered by the objective. For example, if you have written your objective like those given in 1 and 3 above, to carry out experiment. So what is your research question? No, what is the correct way of running experiment? No, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, because writing, carrying experiment is not your research question. Your research question is to find what? So for example, to carry out experiment to determine something. Okay, so that to determine is actually your objective, not to carry out experiment. So just start with to determine, right? But you can say to determine something by carrying out experiment. Okay, that one is okay. Although it's not necessary, you can explain that in methodology later. So how you want to do to achieve your objective, you don't have to explain in the objective itself. But you can also put if you want, but it's not necessary. You can explain in literature. But for now, just what you seek to find. Okay, objectives are what you seek to find, which is what new knowledge you want to find. Those are objectives. Okay, so this is an example of how research question related to objective. If you were to close the sorry, if you to start with the research questions, to what extent does changes in hull form contribute towards the total cost of the ship? You convert that into objective by saying to assess the extent of contribution of changes in hull form towards total cost of a ship. Okay, so most of the words are very similar. You just rewrite it, making it with the to. So verb, what's the verb? Assess. To, determine. To, evaluate. To, identify. Because the question says what is the best method. So now you want to identify the best method. Okay, so that is what you want to do in your objectives. Okay, so the knowledge that you're going to generate is you're going to get how does changes in so it's, which is the research question. The research question is actually defining what knowledge you are going to generate because you are going to answer that question. Okay. And now if you imagine now, if we were to remove the research question, you start with the objectives and you work backward. If you have not known this research question before, you just found an article or thesis which writes the objective, then you can ask, what is the research question that this objective is trying to answer? Then if you can write something like that, then it's a good objective. Okay, so you try to come back. So same thing, if you were to formulate your own objective without doing research question first, you try to do the research question after you formulate your objective and see whether you can make research question out of the objective or not. Okay, if you cannot, that means your objective is not good. Okay, so if you were to see like John's example again, the research question, remember, does the amount of sugar have an effect on the size of grandma's bread? What is the amount of sugar that give the biggest loaf? So what do you think should be the objectives? Can you write down the objective now for John's work? So it's maybe something to, since we don't know what's the amount of sugar, that means we want to determine the amount of sugar, right? And since number 2 is want to exactly which one, then you want to identify. Okay, so that's the two. These are the two objectives: to determine whether the amount of sugar has an effect on bread size, and to identify the optimal amount of sugar which gives the biggest loaf of bread. And again, this is if we see the whole picture of John's work. Yeah. So this is from the research questions. It goes to objectives. Methodology. John will have to explain how to achieve objective 1 and how to achieve objective 2. And this is, remember, he has already completed his work. Then he can write something like this in his conclusion. This research has shown that the amount of sugar has an effect on the size of bread. So this is a confirmed knowledge that was not known before this. Okay, so remember this? That's how we relate this conclusion. Before this, we do not know. But now John, after carrying out his experiment or his research, found already that this is the research. And this is the another knowledge found which answered the research question. And of course, solve the objectives. Yeah. And this solve the problem. And all this finally solve the research problem. Okay. So this is what we mean by the connection between research problem statement to research question, objective, methodology, and conclusions. Now we see some example. So the example of one student, he has 3 similar questions: will, meditation, and so on, to determine effectiveness, determine efficacy, determine of effectiveness, yeah, of meditation. Okay, so you relate it like that. Of course, I don't expect you and him to write this in the thesis to have this box like this, yeah. But you can write in different sections, research questions and 1.5 research question and 1.6 objectives. Okay, something like that. Not necessarily related like this. But during presentation, you can show something like this. How you develop your objective you can show how you develop it. And this one is okay, examples of objective: to determine, to identify, to develop a new relation. So okay, now we go to our second last part, which is scope or delimitation. Research students often mistook research methodology activities as scope of research. For example, some write the scope as follows: literature review, experimental work, data analysis, computer programming, writing up. And that's the scope. Everybody is doing this. Everybody is doing literature review and experimental work, data analysis, and so on. But so this is not correct, yeah, because these are just activities for research methodology, yeah. But scope of research are actually delimitation of the research, the boundary. You are defining the area to be included or excluded for research. So essentially narrowing the study area. This also define the boundary for the validity of the findings of the research. So we see some example. Uh, uh, the example here, this study will involve full-scale experimental work and CFD analysis. So this one, okay, you are not telling about your methodology, but you just want to say that you are not going to cover a different kind of scope. For example, laboratory experiment. I'm going to start. My scope is I'm going to do full-scale study experiment and CFD. Okay, but I'm not as if you are going to you're declaring. Don't ask me why my thesis or my work does not cover laboratory experiment, because I've declared that from the beginning that my work is only full scale experiment and CFD. Okay, or maybe your my study will only involve field survey. Okay, so people cannot ask you more than that, beyond that, because this is what I plan to do. Okay, so this is what during the proposal presentation, okay, mini viva or professor defense, this is what people want to want to see. Then they will say, oh, this scope is too small because you want to do full scale experiment and CFD only. You need to include another part, for example, model experiment, okay, to make it really complete the scope. So that's why this is important. Okay. Okay. So the other one is we scope in. The study covers South China Sea, Peninsula Malaysia, local Malaysian student use diesel engine, ship below 500 gross ton, Malaysian made cars only. So this is scope in. That means I'm my research is not going to cover beyond this. Okay, I'm not my research is not going to cover beyond this. I'm going to look only South China Sea. Don't expect my work to cover Straits of Malacca, for example. I'm going to look at Peninsula Malaysia. So my result will not be valid for Borneo, for Sabah, Sarawak. I'm going to look only at Malaysian made cars. So whatever conclusion that I get is about Malaysian made cars only. So all this basically will protect the validity of your research. And again, during Viva, people will say, why are you going to copying all this South China Sea? Maybe this work that you are doing is also relevant to Strait of Malacca. Okay, so you increase the scope, something like that. So that's why people want to see how big or how small is the field that you are looking at. So the other one is you scope out what your study will not involve. You can say, for example, my study will not involve private hospitals. So that means my study is only going to look at government hospitals. My study will not involve fuel medication modification. Although various people have looked at various this topic, the same part, some people look at also use fuel modification to get the same results. But my work will not involve fuel medication modification, for example. Yeah, same thing like the study only involves teachers in government schools, and sorry, will not involve teachers in government school. That means my study will involve only teachers in non-government schools, and my study will not involve factories not registered with local authorities. So these are scoping out. So you must know what are the limits of your research. Maybe about your own country. So I'm going to look at Nigeria. I'm going to look at Malawi only. This study. So whatever data that I get is only for Malawi. Whatever conclusion that I get is only for Malawi. Whatever, so that's what we mean by scope. Okay. And finally, this is our last part, significance. Significance explain the practical use or benefit of your work. It describes how the outcome of your project can help the target group, such as industry, the designer, the manufacturer, the people, the government, etc. So this is the actual relevance of your work, the practical use and benefit of your work. You must say that. For example, you're studying like um, you're studying something about solar heating, for example. Then you must say that what your work, who will benefit from your work? Okay, who will benefit and how they will benefit? Okay, so you study about cars. In this case, for example, the outcome of this project will enable cars to have less cabin noise. Or he's studying about noise in the car and he's trying to improve it, so the outcome will be good. The technique developed can be used by the farming machinery designer to improve the life of farmers. Okay, so that's the farmers can get improvement from the technique that you're developing. Okay, and then the result of the study will enable the authority to define limits, speed limits based on scientific data. So before this, how to define scientific speed limits? They say, oh, since that country use 110, we also use 110. So, but we need to study exactly why 110, not 115 or 120 or 90. Why this area is 70, why this area is 90, and so on. Who decide that and how do they decide? So, because of that, this is my study will finally can be used, the results can be used to define those speed limit. Okay.